What I'd like to do is cover a little bit about what comes out of the box that isn't developer focused, and then cover some new features that are going to be in the next version in 5.1. So who am I? Michael West, hello, Sitecore MVP. I've been working on the Sitecore PowerShell extension module for I think like 5 years. So I think like 2013 I started working on it with Adam. It's new in 5.0. So we are currently in the 5.0 version that was released last year just before Symposium. So there's a PowerShell dashboard. So you technically build your own reports, more like charts. So if you think of the charts that are in the different marketing features of Sitecore, you could build your own using PowerShell. Not sure how many people are currently doing that, but I'd like to see that mature. There's a rules-based reports, which is fantastic for the marketers. You're essentially using configuration rather than PowerShell to build a report. So hey, give me all the pictures that are missing the alt tag. That's configuration. That's not PowerShell coding. So I felt that that was a good opportunity for other parts of the Sitecore community to take advantage of the module. But if you do write PowerShell, find item can now do complex predicates. So you can do, there's 4 different ways that you can do this now. You can either have a hash table with criteria, you can have this sort of dynamic link where you inject variables into a query. But the more popular one is a predicate. So a couple different commands where you combine an and or relationships into a single call, and you end up getting something just like you could through C#. And jump in if you've got any questions. I know I'm a riveting speaker, but I'm sure there's something that's in your mind. Please tell me. The reports, there's been quite a bit of improvements. I've updated the icons to the Sitecore 8 icons. There's some new ones like Audit Trail, looking at items that have security associated with it, like a user role associated with a particular item. Let's go find let's run the report to give me that. Hey, do I have any media that's 5 megabytes or bigger? So reports, I think, add a lot of value, and these are ones that had been on my mind. The export with Excel export was super slow, so I've made some improvements to that. Some simple UI improvements, just in general. Integration points, so these are features where, let's say I want to run some code when a user logs in, logs out. I want to have a context menu, a ribbon button. So now pretty much all of those use the rules engine. It's more of a performance thing, but because you can use the rules engine, you can prevent scripts from running unnecessarily. There's a new tool for elevated unlock, so you could grant like a power user, maybe someone in marketing, you could grant them access to unlock items. This is useful like if someone leaves the company or they leave the position and you want to be able to unlock that item for them. There's just a baked-in tool now for that. I'll show a demo of some of the new tools in the toolbox, specifically the data management area. And if you are writing PowerShell scripts, there's a feature in the ISC to inject little snippets of code. So you're like, hey, I forgot how to use the read variable to show a dialog. You just go in the ISC, push a button, and it spits it right out into the ISC. So you don't have to be a wizard at remembering all of the syntax. You just use a little feature. In the console, I've made some improvements to that, more of a cosmetic kind of improvement. And 5.1, this is coming out whenever. I don't know when it comes out, but I think when it's ready, people will happily use it. I've got some new commands for managing the archive and the recycle bin. So if you've ever deleted something, by default in PowerShell it goes to the recycle bin. How do I undelete those? How do I permanently delete those when they're already in the recycle bin? So there's some commands for that. More commands for managing renderings. Let's say you have got an example where I've got 100 pages. I need to know which 100 pages are personalized, and then I need to go change the personalization on those pages. We got commands to let you do that kind of thing, right? So think practical. How can I make changes in bulk? And you could turn this into a tool if you wanted to. SXA, they had an upgrade, I think it was like from 1.6 to 1.7. they had an upgrade wizard that actually touched all of the rendering parameters. If this version had been out, then they wouldn't have had to write custom stuff for that. And also placeholder settings. SPE remoting, so this is a feature that allows you to communicate with Sitecore PowerShell extensions remotely, perhaps from a continuous integration setup. So you got to build a deployment server, you want to be able to do something inside of Sitecore while it's up and running, then SPE remoting is for you. I've mostly refactored out the SOAP web service, so there's an ASMX service that basically tanked the Sitecore instance if you tried to download a picture that was more than 100K. So now it doesn't use that at all. It uses a HTTP handler. So you can download 15 gigs from your media library and it not blink, right? So it's chunked streaming, so a little bit more advanced. But this is relevant for the demo, and I hope you appreciate it. The UI translations, so now we are making it easier for others to contribute to SPE with, Japanese, German language, Dutch language. So we hope that the community will contribute. Basically, we'll export XML, they'll update the translation file, and then SPE will be translated into your native language. So if that's good for your customers, like, hey, we built some tools, but the UI doesn't fit for them, we'll get them to translate it for us, and then now the tools have their language. All right, time for a demo. I promise you I won't beat you to death with PowerPoint. So there are 3 specific areas I'd like to cover with respect to importing data or migrating data. I feel like that's a relevant topic for an agency because you either want to do something trivial like import a spreadsheet, updates a bunch of content, or I want to synchronize something. I jokingly call this a DEF, a def killer, because it's kind of complicated to use that just for something trivial like a spreadsheet. We've got, at our company, we've got a careers export to a CSV file. I don't want to go through the pain of setting up DEF for that kind of integration. So this is data template and PowerShell scripting. That's all it is. But I built a little module that you could play with, and hopefully it benefits you. And then the content migrator is it's PowerShell remoting with Unicorn, Rainbow serialization, and allows you to move data, move content from one instance to another. Questions before I dive in? No? Cool. All right, so I've got a couple instances up in case something bombs. I'll have another working one. So if you're familiar with Sitecore PowerShell extensions, there are a couple tools that are installed. One's this console. It's just a console. It's supposed to mimic what is available on your Windows environment. See, it looks like Windows. The toolbox is really more interesting because you can build tools and put them in this little menu and then have other developers use it, right? So imagine you're working on a project, you want to put together a simple tool, you hand it off to the client. Client comes here and they've got the Rightpoint or whoever's tool sitting in this toolbox. You can manage the menu with rules engine, so if you say I only want certain roles to see it, then you can do that. The data management comes with a couple neat things. One's a bulk data generator, so I want to create 100 users, or I want to generate a tree of 1,000 items. This could do that for you. The bulk item restore lets go find items in the recycle bin and restore those based on a date, based on a user, or something like that. The data importer is really the more interesting piece. This is a simple utility for taking a spreadsheet, importing that into Sitecore. So for example, I can download this sample file. Hopefully I don't have any weird things on here. And so the sample file is just a easy structure for you to follow. Item ID, the name, the title, the content, right? So nothing too complicated. And then following through the UI, we want to import these items. And we're just going to get a dialog to upload the file to Sitecore. I think this is a custom dialog we built, but the control for the file upload is a Sitecore control. Then we'll do the sample file. And now we can say where we want to scope these updates to. If you're updating by an ID, well then it doesn't matter, it's going to be unique. But if your spreadsheet didn't have item IDs, like it's all new content, and you just had item names, well then this is where it would be most applicable. Like, hey, I've created a bunch of new pages in a spreadsheet, and those items don't exist in Sitecore, then I want to upload my spreadsheet and go create new items with that spreadsheet. Okay, well that's a useful feature. You can say what you want the data template to be based upon. It's not really smart enough at the moment to know, like, hey, I've got 5 different data templates. Like, I've got articles and I've got primary pages and secondary pages. It doesn't do that, but we could make it do that, and that wouldn't be too complicated. We could just make the spreadsheet have the template name in it, right? So there's some improvements that can be made, but if people aren't using it, well then I'm not going to work on it anymore. And then field names. So if the ID is not available, then you can say what is another unique field to match on. So let's say you've imported items that are locations, and there's a location ID on those items. You could say that the location ID is a unique identifier, and when it does the import, compares the ID, does the import, right? It didn't need to know the GUID for the page. It didn't need to know the page name. It just used that field, right? So fairly trivial, but you could skip that if the ID's there. It attempts to auto-map the fields for you. So if you've got case insensitive, if you've got the same name, but maybe there's a space in it, uppercase, lowercase, doesn't matter. It'll just auto-match these for you. But text and content, right, it can't guess that. Not really. So you could pick that. And then you get a simple output that says, hey, this is what happened. And then you go look at the page, and assuming that it really did work, then you'll see that the content was updated by the data importer right here, right? So simple, but it's a tool that you build for the marketers. It's something that you could build for even like a little admin, like someone who's not a content editor, they're not personalizing pages, they're not a developer, they don't know PowerShell, but you wanted them to have a very specific feature. This could be something that you could give them. All right, so the data sync is another really cool one. And I've already imported it, but I'll just run it so you can see it. So in this example, we have a web service that sources all of our locations for our clinics. I work for a healthcare company, and we have over 500 clinics. Well, I want those clinics to be represented as pages within Sitecore, but I don't want to use def to build that for me, because maybe I don't want to have compiled code. I have junior engineers on the team. Our project schedule is too tight, right? You could make up whatever reasons you want. I just want to use simple scripting and configuration. So with the results, we get this PowerShell dialog. It shows that I've imported services. So think of like drug screen, blood sample, whatever that might be. Imported all these items, ran in half a second, imported some states, imported some markets. So companies where they have lots of locations, they might say the Dallas market or the San Francisco market, whatever they're going to call it. And then you keep going down until you get to your specific locations. So when I look into the tree, I have my locations in this hierarchy, right? Hierarchical structure, and services in a different node. Okay, I'm gonna wow you with how complex the setup is. So we have a script library. So these are all script libraries. I just changed the icon. Sweet. And then each of these, I'm just calling them import sets. So it's like I want to import all of this data. It's related data. And when I maybe have a scheduled task and I want to run all these at the same time, I can point the scheduled task to the one folder. Then underneath, I have the sequence of events that need to occur. Services are going to be referenced by another item, so I need to make those imported first. So I just create a new item, right? So not too complicated. I have a path to where the data comes from. So in this case, I'm using a flat file. If it were a web service, when I do this import step, I would just choose that I want to be SQL script or web service, right? So it's going to just create different data templates, nothing crazy. So import data from this file. When I import it, it's in a specific structure that's unique to that client. So all I have to do in some PowerShell wizardry is a short command to restructure that data before I do anything else with it. Right, so in this particular file, each item that's in the file, so each record in the JSON object, has a services node. And each of those services contains a long name for that service. So I just want to get those, right? Nothing crazy. So when I run this script, source items will contain a bunch of services, just a long list, right? Now, so these are the steps, right? So step 2 is I want to create new items at this location in the tree. I want to create a new item. I built a little function that would just simplify removing spaces, lowercasing, replacing spaces with dashes. Maybe you've got a dash in the name, it's going to have space, dash, space. So then when you put dashes in, it's going to have 3 dashes. So I just kind of fix all that stuff. SXA actually does part of this. So if you create an item in the tree, that's like a page, it will lowercase, put dashes, and then change the display name to what you typed in there. Right, so I just duplicated that kind of functionality. It's relevant when you're like creating content pages, but like services, it doesn't really matter because no one's looking at that except in the content editor. But it might matter if you are rendering that data on the page, right? So it's up to you on what you want to do with it. But then you can change the display name if you want to do that. Map the fields. So hey, this is the field on the template, and this is the proper object and property that's in the data that I'm looking at. You can skip some fields. You can match against existing fields as a unique identifier I mentioned earlier. You can skip if the item already exists based on the same name within that tree, or if it matches the ID. And create the items here. Sorry, the first one was the data template. The second one is where in the tree. And I've imported items now. So if someone gave me the file, in 10 minutes, I could probably create the data templates and pick a point in the tree and import it into the Sitecore. You cannot do that with any other data import tool, right? Now, the beauty behind it is because this is a PowerShell script, you can put it in the scheduled task and it'll just run whenever you want. So if you refresh the file or refresh the web service every so often, then it will just do something with it. What is not here out of the box is deleting items. I feel like that's on you to determine if you want to delete them. But what you can do is either when you process each item or when the import's completely done, you can scan through and just go delete items. Because like you got to publish, there's all these kind of things that you got to work out in your use case. But each of these boxes, except that one, each of these that are like single line and multi-line text, these are just text boxes that you can put a PowerShell expression. And then it will evaluate that expression and do whatever you want. But the goal here is to create a template for someone else to do an import, right? So looking at it, okay, maybe it seems a little complex, but if you were tasked to go build an import, you'd be like, oh, that's 80 hours. You'd make up some time, 13 points, or I don't know, you just make up something because you don't know, right? Well, I could confidently say that if I've seen the data, I could get it into Sitecore today, and then we can negotiate if the data's all there, right? So in the sample I set up for you, services is referential data. So there's a multi-list on the item, and so through this process, when I import these, eventually I do some magic, but then what I end up with is in my locations. These are actual locations, by the way, is I have services associated with these items. Now, I don't want to pay someone to go manually change these, right? That's not maintainable. So the import will just do that over and over and over. And if a service gets removed from the import, then the item will get updated and the service will be missing, right?
So if that's scheduled task, and then you could drop those flat files in there, and it could essentially just pull forward.
Yeah. So if we.
You don't even have to have a human involved with that after you write it at all.
Yeah.
So except to drop the file, I guess. Maybe not even that.
Well, so like at our company, we went through this ridiculous process of they do it. Our one company exports the data from some system. I don't know how they do that. And then they do a database export to a flat file, and then transfers to SFTP, and SFTP goes to our SFTP, and that SFTP goes to a file share on a Unix share, and then it goes to a Windows share, and then I have the file. And that took like forever to get set up. Well, so maybe a web service would be more ideal, right? But whatever your circumstances for that client, because I'm sure you're going to deal with a client that has that process, once you know where the data is at, then a developer should be equipped to go set this up and not be, super proficient in PowerShell or C# or deployments and whatever. This is just content. You can package this up and put it in another environment. So you mentioned about the scheduled task. So with PowerShell extensions, you do get a nifty wizard. Boom, new PowerShell scripted task. You would, call it sweet task. And then you would go into your, you just browse wherever in the tree and you just pick a script. I believe I have this one set up for folders. So I can do a whole group all together. In Sitecore, so just in Sitecore, you can either do a path pipe delimited, or one ID, one GUID. So this wizard just allows you to get that path into the scheduled task without having to copy and paste, because that's annoying. So here I have my locations import. And the second one is, hey, let's go set the interval on when to run. So all of this will get translated into, Sitecore's fantastic structure of that, and it puts in that ID or that path for you, right? You can also run it from this little menu. Now these, all of these options here, and in the other buttons like the toolbox, those are only available for developers by default. You have to explicitly grant access to marketers or other roles, because you could build some destructive tools in this. At the same time, you could build them some really powerful tools, right? And even these menu items can be controlled with rules. So you could say, hey, I want, marketing power users to have this button here. Oh, sweet, they get that. And then I can do run task. And hey, it's doing the import. Isn't that cool? Now it's set as synchronous, so you just sit and wait for it. If you did async, which there's not an option in the UI for that, then it would run as a job. If you'd like to get in touch with me, I'm on Slack. I spend all day at work staring, waiting for someone to join the channel. It's like, who's next? I can say hi, welcome. So I spend a lot of time on Slack. It's the module SPE channel. We have a documentation site, Sitecore PowerShell extension, PowerShell.com. It's probably the most complete documented module, because I've got like a gazillion pages out there. And
That's not a lie.
yeah,
It's a lot.
Almost every command has a page. There's code snippets and all sorts of stuff. And obviously I'm on Twitter. And that's what the poster looks like if it's interesting to you. Cool.
I will gladly take that.
Okay, cool. And I've got more at home if y'all invite me back. So. Cool. All right, well, thank you.